Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very intriguing show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is none other than Brad Meltzer, and he's here to share with us his new book, The Lincoln Conspiracy: The Secret Plot to Kill America's 16th President and Why It Failed. Now, Brad is such an inspiration. We've had him on the show before to talk about both his adult books and his children's book series. He's a #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Escape Artist and many other bestselling thrillers, as well as Ordinary People Change the World series, which is his children's book series. He's also the host of the History Channel TV show Brad Meltzer's Decoded and Brad Meltzer's Lost History, which he used to help find the missing 9/11 flag that the firefighters raised at Ground Zero. So let's welcome to the show, Brad Meltzer.
Always good to be back. Thank you for having me again.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I mean, congratulations. I mean, it's flying off the shelves. Everyone is loving this book.
I think all the people that are buying it right now are my family, but no, I'm kidding. My parents, when they were alive, used to tease me, and they said, "You can't possibly know every person who buys your books, Brad," because when you have your first book signing, the first person who shows up, your family, and then the next signing it's like cousins, and then the first time someone comes to your signing, you don't know who they are. And you go, and I remember looking up and going, "Do I know you from high school? No. College? No." And I was like, "Well, what are you doing here?" So thank you for that. It's really, I appreciate that there are people here who I don't know who buy the books now.
Well, hey, I've been honored to get to know you over the last, been a few years now with your great books that you've been putting out. So I have to ask you, how did you guys find out about this piece in history that even had this book going?
Yeah, this story came from when I was working on the History Channel TV show, of all things, about Abraham Lincoln's assassination. And I found out everyone knows the story of John Wilkes Booth and killing Abraham Lincoln. This is not that story. This is the story of Abraham Lincoln at the start of his presidency, and it's the assassination attempt that actually failed. And when I found out that there was a story out there that involved a secret society, the Pinkerton detectives, America's first female private eye, and almost killing Abraham Lincoln at the start of his presidency, I was like, I need to tell that story. And it was right there that this book, The Lincoln Conspiracy, was really born.
Oh my goodness. Well, your book, I mean, everyone knows the outcome, but man, is it a great read. And I love how you started from, right in 1861 and you're on the train. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, so it is the moment, right? So the book opens up, the prologue, and it's really, I love that you singled it out because it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. And you are in Cecil County, Maryland, February 23rd, 1861, and there's a secret on this speeding train. And we're in the northeastern corner of Maryland, and it's flat farmland, and everything looks pretty normal. There's passenger cars and tender cars and cargo car. Passengers on this train in the rear sleeper car. And it's two middle-aged businessmen, a young woman, and her invalid brother. But what you see on this train is not what it seems, because who's really on this train, the woman is not using her real name. She's got a fake name. The invalid uses a fake name. The businessmen are using fake names. They all bought their tickets under other pretenses. None of them are who they say they are. And the brother is certainly not only not her brother, but not his name is Abraham Lincoln. And without spoiling the ending, this is the moment where the Pinkerton detectives, one of the people on the train is Alan Pinkerton. One of them is Kate Warren, America's first female private detective. And they are the ones who crack this case and decide we have to save Abraham Lincoln's life. And they put him in a disguise. They give him a code name. And in the middle of the night, they're going to whisk him off and try and save his life. End chapter 1. The Lincoln Conspiracy begins.
And it keeps going from there, So, I mean, what a great read. So why don't you share with our listeners a little bit what it was like in 1861? Because I think a lot of people, they may need a little refresher.
Yeah, you know what, and this is what attracted me to the story. I mean, just to set the stage for where we are. What happens is Abraham Lincoln is, of course, elected in 1860, and so you see that when he found out he was going to be president, that he was actually playing handball of all things on the back of a building, and they came and told him, "Hey, you're going to be the next president." You get to see him in these human moments, and the world at that time, though, is a very different place, and this is why we cared about the book. The culture at the Civil War is about to break out. 3 days after Abraham Lincoln is elected, South Carolina passes a resolution that they plan to secede from the Union. 3 days. That's how long they gave him. They hated Abraham Lincoln so much in the South that they wouldn't even put him on the ballot. Most people never even voted for him for president. The South was so committed against everything he stood for. And it's a time where, if you even go a couple years earlier, one of my favorite scenes in the book, and it's horrifying, really, is you see Senator Sumner is a U.S. senator who has given a speech against slavery. And he had kind of badmouthed some people who were pro-slavery and said this is a horrible thing, we shouldn't have slavery around. Gives really something that you can't really argue with today. But what no one sees is on the Senate floor, a congressman comes into the Senate floor and basically says, "You've insulted my relative" in that speech. And then he raises his wooden cane with a metal tip on it, and he starts beating the senator over the head. 1, 2, 3, over and over and over and over. There's blood flowing everywhere. This is a sitting congressman beating a sitting senator on the floor of the U.S. Senate. And you see just how divided we are as a culture. It is a moment in time where half the country hates the other half. Whatever their politics are, you think the other side are all horrible. Does that sound familiar to you?
A little bit, yeah.
Right? That's right where we are. That's right where we are today. And the reason why Josh and I, who worked on this book with me and co-wrote the book with me, is the reason we were so attracted to this story is because it is a window into where we are today, a completely divided culture. And it is just a time where that hatred for the South to the North and the North to the South is it's not just, oh, here's the Civil War and remember the Confederate flag, but you literally have physical beatings and lynchings and venomous hatred. And this is the country that Abraham Lincoln inherits when he becomes the president in 1860. It is and in the time from when he elected to when he's sworn in, I think it's 6 states will secede from the Union. Right? It's barely a month. He's got a month under his belt from his election, and 6 states are already gone. There's no president in history that walked into a greater disaster that was like a crumbling building around him than Abraham Lincoln did at the start of his presidency. And what I think is so important to show readers is, we all know Abraham Lincoln as a finished product. The man who wins the Civil War and the slaves, go free and the Emancipation Proclamation gets signed. But this is Abraham Lincoln at the start of it all. This is where he has no idea what he's doing. This is where he doesn't even have the beard yet. This is where no one knows his name. They're misspelling his name in some of the posters that you'll see in the book. And, this is a real life, true story that really happened. But you get to see the parts about Abraham Lincoln that you never realized happened. And that, this, we've talked about this before. Whether it's your hero is Rosa Parks or George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or anyone else, they all have moments where they're scared or they're terrified and they don't know if they could go on. And when we make a mistake today in America, we take our heroes, we put them up on pedestals and we worship at their feet, and we forget that they're human beings just like us. So this is, in the Lincoln Conspiracy, you get to see Abraham Lincoln as a regular human being.
Yeah, how important is that? I mean, a lot of times when we have these kind of connections with, we hear about history, most people don't even see that they are someone that we can really look at as, having a human experience. They're almost like demigods in many ways.
And that's an error that we make. I mean, and we do it with everyone around you, but it's not. I mean, this plot isn't thwarted by Abraham Lincoln. It's not thwarted by a Secret Service because, they're not doing security work. It's not even there. What thwarts the plot is America's first private detective, a man named Allan Pinkerton. And Allan Pinkerton's a guy who's, working in Chicago, And he's just like, you kind of, almost like that Sam Spade idea. It's where we get the word private eye from, because his original Pinkerton Detective Agency had a giant eye in its logo. So that's where we get private eye. And Alan Pinkerton and the Pinkerton Detective Agency is basically gets wind that there may be someone who's out there who hates Abraham Lincoln, who may want to blow up one of the trains or blow up one of the train tracks or do something bad. And he's on the case. But the thing that's so great about it is that the other person who's on the case with him is a woman named Kate Warren. And I mentioned her before. She's America's first female private detective. And Kate Warren, I think she's 26 years old, walks into Alan Pinkerton's office a few years earlier and says, I want to be your new private eye. At a time when no woman is hired to be a private eye or in law enforcement or as an investigator. Kate Warren just says, I want the job. And Alan Pinkerton, whether it's because I don't know, to this day, no one knows if it's because he's so forward thinking on women's rights or just because he's a businessman and he realizes, you know what, people are going to talk to this woman in ways they're never going to talk to me. Whatever the case is, on that day, he says, you know what, you're hired. And it's these two people, Alan Pinkerton, Kate Warren, female private detective, and the other detectives in the agency, most people have never heard of, ordinary, regular citizens, who are the ones who save Abraham Lincoln's life in the most easy and simple of ways, in this daring adventure. And I love the fact that it's ordinary people using role to play. And we have to stop kind of treating everyone like demigods. They're just like us. And all of us, are brave and we are terrified. And we are vulnerable and we are unstoppable. And we are amazing and we are awful. Some of us all in the same day, some of us all in the same hour. And it just depends on the moment you catch us. And we have to, that's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing. And it's what you'll see throughout the Lincoln conspiracy is watching these people, including Abraham Lincoln, be normal human people.
Is that why you think people, Americans have really embraced your book as well as they have? Is because there's a little bit of that in all of us?
I think listen, I hope so. That's certainly our goal. But what is very important to me is I think people right now are starving for a leader like Abraham Lincoln. I think we're a culture that's really divided. And whether I go and see, friends that are on Fox News or friends that are on CNN, there is one thing that both sides actually agree on right now. And it's that the way we're talking to each other as a culture is disgusting. The way we talk to each other is disgusting. The way whatever party you're in, we talk about the other side is disgusting. We're doing it wrong. We are doing it wrong. And it takes a leader like Abraham Lincoln to show us how to do it right. When Abraham Lincoln, and we end the book at this moment when he, and let's just talk, just so I can back up and set the stage a little bit more. What happens in the book is that Abraham Lincoln is elected president. And what he needs to do, of course, is get from his hometown in Illinois, where he's living at the time, and he needs to go to Washington, D.C. to raise his right hand and be sworn in as the 16th president of the United States. And to get from Illinois to Washington, D.C., at that point in time, unless you're going by horse, you got to take a train. There's no cars. You're taking a train. And the trains, because you have to keep switching lines, the only way to get there is you got to go through one city, Baltimore. You must go through Baltimore, Maryland. And Maryland at the time was a slave state. So the plan was very simple. The secret society, when Abraham Lincoln got to Baltimore and switched trains, they were going to murder him. That was the plan. Be done in the, right as that train came through. It was organized by a secret society called the Knights of the Golden Circle, led by an infamous barber of all things. And this barber worked in one of Baltimore's fanciest hotels, including the plot to kill Abraham Lincoln. And that's the plot. That's exactly what's going to happen. But I think as you read the book, what you see, and I think the reason people are responding to it, hopefully, is that they see where we are today, and they see that these leaders like Abraham Lincoln aren't perfect in every single way, but we can find greatness with us when we stand together. Because at the end of the book, it's no surprise, Abraham Lincoln lives. We know that part. But when he lives, and he gets sworn in as the 16th president, you know what he says in the inaugural address? He doesn't say, he could easily rip apart the other side. They just tried to kill him. And instead he says we should be friends. We're not enemies. Veer to the better angels of our nature. And that's what we need right now. That's what I hope people are reacting to, is getting to see that side of Abraham Lincoln and watch him just stand so beautifully and bravely and in that time of such great darkness that he always, always reaches for the light.
Oh, my goodness, you've got so much wonderful history that's been uncovered here. How did you get to this point where you're doing this research? How did you guys find all this?
So Josh mentions our secret weapon. Josh, my co-writer on the book, was our executive producer when we did our History Channel TV show Lost History. And he was the best researcher and the best writer I'd seen. And I said to him, do you want to write a book? And we had done the previous book you and I spoke about was the first conspiracy, the secret plot to kill George Washington. And then, of course, we had to do the Lincoln conspiracy about the secret plot to kill Abraham Lincoln. And, the difference between George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, beside the 100 years, is that by then we knew what a president was. And so the document even more than we ever had in terms of finding things. And what's so incredible when you look at it is we can find his schedule from that day. We can see what he was doing every day. You can find in Pinkerton's notes, we have his actual notes from that day, and we have Kate Warren's, and we have all the other detectives' contemporaneous notes as it's happening in real time. In fact, one of my favorite moments in the book is this moment where they have to finally actually go to Abraham Lincoln and tell him that someone's trying to kill him. And it's one of my favorite scenes in the Lincoln conspiracy. I won't ruin it for you, but you'll see it. But one of the things that Abraham Lincoln said, listen, sir, we need to get you out of town. You're not safe here. They're going to kill you. So tomorrow, you're supposed to be in Philadelphia. We think we should skip that train stop in Philadelphia. We're going to get you to Washington a day earlier, and that way no one can kill you when you get to Baltimore. Makes sense, right? Abraham Lincoln says, no, I'm going to Philadelphia. And they're like, why? What's in Philadelphia? And you know what he's planning in Philadelphia? It's I believe, February 22nd. They're honoring George Washington's birthday, and George Washington is Abraham Lincoln's hero. And he says, I'm going to honor my hero, George Washington. And when you look at the speech, we found the actual speech that Lincoln gave that day, and you can see that when he goes to Philadelphia, he is actually in Independence Hall, and he's honoring George Washington. He says, basically, if we don't stand together as the country, I should be, you might as well assassinate me. He literally says the words. It's incredible moment, because he knows that they're going to kill him at that moment. There is a plot to kill him. And he doesn't care, and I won't ruin the ending, but it's from there that they actually sneak him away, and Abraham Lincoln makes an escape in a daring way that I will not spoil for you. But it is one of the great moments of history that just becomes a footnote and disappears until Josh, we read through these things and find these contemporaneous accounts, and we get to, of course, share them with you.
What were some of the surprising things that Josh found for this book?
I think for both of us, one of the things I knew about that we really wanted to look at were, the plot is obviously amazing. It's amazing to see. Finding the stories of the private detectives and what they did behind scenes, all of that is wonderful. I love that. But one of the things that I loved is just seeing Abraham Lincoln be a human being. He's just this incredible person. And one of the things he does is he makes, right after he's elected and he's about to leave for Washington, D.C., one of the last things he does, he goes and visits his old law partner to say goodbye to him. And we found the letters and the notes, like that what they said. I mean, it's incredible. Like it is incredible to see what their last conversation is. And then the last thing he does is he goes home. He goes home to visit. He wants to see his father's grave. Abraham Lincoln wants to see his dad's grave, and he wants to visit his stepmother. And it's the woman he loved, the woman who really he was close to. And they have this wonderful moment together. And what she says is, when he leaves, I'm worried he's going to be assassinated. She's worried she's never going to see him again. And she knows that, and she's crazily absolutely right. And just seeing those moments are the ones that really got to me, where you just see this man, like, human being, this man, we all know Abraham Lincoln. He's arguably one of the most famous Americans in history. But my God, like, to see him, the things that we know about him, I should say, Marianne, are the cliches. If you woke up an American in the middle of the night and you said, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, slept in a log cabin, all the cliches. But to see him be just a regular person who's scared and worried, you see, they actually lose the draft of his first inauguration. Like, it's incredible. And to see that take place is just wild. It really does. That's what really kind of caught me off guard, are the human moments.
I love that. And I think I have time for one more question here. So why do you think Lincoln is such a reminder of the capacity of human greatness, and especially American greatness right now?
I mean, it's a question I'm asking myself every day, even now. What makes him great? In the beginning, I think it was because I thought, he's this guy from nothing, and he becomes, ascends to the greatest and highest office in the land, and he somehow never forgets where he comes from, and he lives in these two worlds. And George Washington lived in two worlds also, came from, very small, low education, but, ascended really high. And I'm like, is that what it is? I'm like, I don't know. There's lots of people who are poor. It doesn't mean make you great. Just, you don't have to be poor to, there's no causation involved there. And so I've been trying and wrestling with that question. And the thing that I just keep coming back to is that Abraham Lincoln, in the end, I actually think he just has that level of character that is beyond anything we've seen before and even after. I mean, you can see these stories when he's young of him, coming upon baby birds, and everyone's riding on their horse and they're all racing to some destination. And basically he is, rushing off, and he sees a baby bird that falls out of the nest, and he stops, and everyone's laughing. I'm saying, why are you stopping with that baby bird? And he's like, because if I leave this baby bird, I'll never be able to stop thinking about it when I could have helped it. And that's greatness to me. That's greatness, kindness and generosity. Remember when, humility was a great American value? We've lost that. What we pay attention to today on social media are those who call great attention to themselves. That's what social media is, those who are the best at calling attention to themselves. And I'm tired of those people. I'm tired of those who write in all caps and triple exclamation point and say, look at me, I. We need the humility of an Abraham Lincoln. We need the kindness and the generosity of spirit. What Abraham Lincoln does better than anyone is he's not working for himself. He's working for others. It's easier for him to leave the slaves where they are. Just whatever, deal with it. Move on. Like it doesn't affect him. He's white. But he just realizes there are more important things than just serving yourself. You have to serve others. That we're all in this together. It's the moment of Gettysburg, and this is probably the perfect place to end, right? Is at Gettysburg, he gives a speech and he says, no one will remember what I say here today. And he's absolutely wrong. His speech there that day is something like, less than 300 words, like 291 words, I think. But the most important are those 5 words that we all know. Right? All men are created equal. And it's not something that he just says or that he just knows or that he just learns because they taught him. He lives it, and he proves it, and he stands for it, even at great risk to himself. That, to me, is why he's the icon. And that, I hope, is not just the story of a good man, but it's a story, I hope, is what we as Americans should be. It's the story of America itself.
Yeah, without a doubt, we can learn so much from that. I really like your book, The Lincoln Conspiracy. Brad, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
So you can come to bradmeltzer.com. You can find me on Facebook.com/Brad Meltzer, Twitter, Brad Meltzer, Instagram, Brad Meltzer. All of them are the same thing. Just put my name in. You will find me everywhere. And the books are obviously for Mother's Day, for Father's Day, or for just today, The Lincoln Conspiracy. If you need some inspiration and you need some history in your life and you need to see what greatness looks like, that's what I recommend.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you, Brad. It's always such an honor to spend time with you, and I loved reading The Lincoln Conspiracy and highly recommend it. Again, if people like to order their copy of The Lincoln Conspiracy, it's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers, and of course, it's on Kindle and audiobook. Again, if you'd like to connect with Brad and learn more about not just this book, but all of his writings, you can at bradmeltzer.com for more information. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. When we come back, we'll be speaking with author Joe Bain in regards to his new book, Drop Dead. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. Our next special guest today is Joe Bain, and he's here to share with us his new book, Drop Dead, a Nick Sterling and Zoe Lasseter mystery. Now, Joe spent most of his writing career in the San Francisco Bay Area as an advertising copywriter specializing in direct mail. Over the years, he worked in the advertising and marketing departments of large corporations as well as local ad agencies. Over time, Joe started a direct marketing agency where he specialized in the creation of marketing programs for small businesses. It was during this period of time that the seeds for a series of murder mysteries were planted. So let's welcome to the show, Joe Bain.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. I mean, I've got to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, it's a long story. The genesis came from old time radio. I've been a big fan. I used to listen to radio when I was a kid, and I was enamored with how they were written and how they were performed. And I just loved the premise. And so then I started getting ideas about what to write while I was writing advertising copy, and saw something in a New York Times newspaper that triggered the idea, and so I took it from there.
So why don't you share with us a little bit about the book? We don't dive too much into it because, of course, we don't do spoiler alerts here, and this is a fiction. So why don't you share with us a little bit about the setting? I understand this happens in San Francisco.
Yes, it does. It takes place in San Francisco in the 1940s. A lot of acting was done on air, and it deals with an actress and a number of people that are on some radio shows. And our actress disappears one day, and the story is about finding out what happened, and finding her, finding out who did whatever they did, if they did anything.
It's such a great mystery read. I know our listeners will really appreciate this, and especially the backdrop. I mean, you look at San Francisco, the 1940s, happening at a station, and it's all this acting going on, because back then it was all about the radio, right?
That's correct. And the genre, I'm enamored with the genre because I grew up on old time radio, and it seemed like a likely location. San Francisco is a big radio day. In the days they were big in radio, and so it just seemed like a likely place to put a murder mystery.
Now, you're such a nice guy. I think a lot of people kind of look at you and go, gosh, you wrote a murder mystery book. There's this whole other side to Joe. So how did you find your inspiration for this book?
Well, radio was part of it. And the inspiration just kind of grows. Once I had the kernel of an idea, it just evolved from there. I needed to have a protagonist, an antagonist, and it just seemed like a natural fit. It's something that I was interested in, and I've been thinking about. The idea came to me years ago, and I just fleshed it out as time went on. And
well, there's
and I like murder, and I like murder mysteries, and so that's kind of what moved me into doing it myself.
Well, I love how you wrapped in, the cold case files in that as well as part of the story. And we're not going to get too much into that, but, really bringing attention to what ends up with some of these cases sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting. The way that the police have cold case files, and of course today on TV, that there are a number of them that focus on cold case. But in the 40s, it was a little different. The bad guys tended to get away with things, and the cops had so many cold case files that if it didn't deal with a high, somebody like in this case, it was an actress, and she got a lot of attention when she disappeared, and so that helped move the story along.
So let's talk a little bit about your writing style and, how you develop these ideas. I mean, once you had that kernel of an idea and you thought, okay, I'm going to write this book, where did it go from there? How did you even find the time to do this?
That's a good question. That's part of the problem of writing, is that life gets in the way. And I was working full time, putting our kids through college. And so it took a while. And it started out as one book, and it ended up being three, because it just evolved. And so out of this one book, Drop Dead, came two others that are going to be coming out. Hopefully one will be coming out this year. And so that's, my research, I love doing research, and there's a lot of research involved in this book, and all three of them actually. And finding names that are made up is always a challenge. And the locations, San Francisco and the San Francisco Bay Area and Mill Valley, which is where I grew up, lends itself to a good part of the story.
Well,
that answers the question.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's interesting when writers really dig into writing what they know. I mean, you were hugely successful in San Francisco with this book because the people living there and the people within that area could really feel like you're writing to them.
And I'm glad you saw that. And a lot of people did say that. They said, I grew up here, and I remember some of those places, and I remember some of those people and some of those radio shows. And it's a lot of fun putting a book together like that, and finding ways to put history into a fictional story, and making it sound interesting and engaging. That adds a lot to it. And when I started, I have to say, it tells you how long ago I started this story. The internet was just a spark in somebody's eye. So I was doing a lot of research at the Mill Valley Library and San Francisco's library, and putting the bones together. And then the internet came along, and boy, that I was off and running, and that was a lot of fun, being able to put a lot of the information together.
So earlier you mentioned that you have done a lot of research for this book. What are some of the interesting things that you discovered in your research?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good question. I think it's just the location itself, and how radio played an interesting part and a big part in the entertainment of people before the war, during the war, and after the war. What TV was not a big deal, wasn't a big deal at all, and so I discovered that because of the way radio became such an important part of the lives of the American people, especially San Franciscans, that impacted how I moved my characters through the story, and I think it was, without even thinking about it, I think those locations added something. I believe they added something to the fun of the story, and the fun is. I think it's a fun read. It's meant to be a fun read, but it's a mystery. You don't know for sure who did it, if anybody did it, and the police department and how they operated, and the language, the lingo, all of that kind of blended right in. And as I got into the story, I didn't think too much. I had a lot of my background done. I had a lot of notes, and I would refer to them from time to time. But as I got into it, my characters kind of took over. And from time to time, they would point me in a different direction. I was like, you don't want to go down there. Go over here. You haven't talked about this person. And it was there was a life of it was a life of its own, which is one of the things that surprised me in putting the book together. If I let it go for a while, they'd start knocking on the inside of my brain and say, "Hey, get back to the story." And so that was something I hadn't anticipated, but a lot of authors say that does happen.
That's really fascinating. I love how that all comes together, just blossoms on its own. Were there times where you had like a story outline and you had to kind of throw that away because the characters are doing their own thing?
For sure. I'm not big on outlines, but I do a rough draft. And that's where I put some of the characters in the locations. And as I move forward, it is an amazing thing that happens. You feel like you're channeling somebody. At least that's how I felt, and it made it a lot of fun to put that together. Sorry.
Yeah. So who were some of your major influencers as you were writing?
Well, I think that the first group of influencers were radio actors. As I would listen to radio dramas, and I got a sense of what they were doing and how they were doing it. And I had collected old radio shows. I must have had 300 hours of old radio shows over the years. And I'd listen to them from time to time and get a sense of how they approached a story. And then that became a part of the story because my protagonist was a policeman, and he was having trouble putting some things together his wife is a radio writer, and she sat down with him one day and said, "You know, you're approaching this in a way that you may not realize is very much the way we write radio programs." And so she kind of walked him through some of the process, and that was an influence of the old time radio shows. And I don't read an awful lot of mysteries, but you know, those that I do read, I have a number of writers that I follow, but I try not to follow them all that much, because I want my ideas to be original. And if I found that if I'm reading too many other books that are mysteries, I fall in line with what they're thinking and how they're approaching it. So I just kind of read a book and then I get back to mine. And but I like Ken Follett and Frederick Forsyth. Alan First is one of my favorite of that particular time frame, and Vince Flynn is another one. But those are influences. But I think the real life people, the people that got down and dirty and actually wrote these radio programs and then acted in them, influenced me more than anything else. And a lot of it I didn't pay too much attention to, because I grew up listening to radio shows and I loved it. And the people that had read the book felt that came through, and they liked that a lot, because a lot of them were of a certain age and grew up on radio the same way.
So why don't you share with us a little bit about your background in writing?
Well, I didn't do a lot of writing until I started working for an ad agency, and then as a client, I did a lot of writing. But in grammar school, I had an uncle, Uncle John. He would read a couple of my stories that I wrote for school, and he says, "Joe, you've got a good way about you writing." He says, "You're a good writer." Now, I never heard that before when I was a kid. I was one of eight kids in the family, and my folks didn't have any time to spend coaching me along. And that helped. I realized that maybe I do have a way of saying something, and so that helped. And then, as an adult, my first jobs brought me into the world of writing, and I learned how to do copywriting very quickly from some of the old San Francisco ad copywriters. So I started focusing on direct mail. And direct mail, you have to tell a story. Of course, all advertising tells a story, but I think direct mail made it easier for me to hone my fiction writing expertise, if you want to call it that. And, so that's more self-taught and by necessity. I would take a couple of webinar courses and to get a sense of where I should be going, and that helped a little bit. But I think what I learned in learning how putting the words together to influence people to buy the product or the service that I was involved in, I thought that was a good training field for me, good way to move a story forward to a conclusion. Getting people to buy your product is that's important, and trying to get people interested in your story. You follow the same kind of rules.
So when we look at your writing in total, I mean, the book Drop Dead is a great read, and I highly suggest our listeners pick up their own copy. And you mentioned that you have 2 other books coming. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, the other 2 carry the characters. I had my 2 main characters, Nick Sterling and Zoe Lassiter. They're a married couple, and they kind of fall into the sleuthing business. So I decided. I think I mentioned that I wrote all three at the same time, and that happened just because one evolved into another, and then another, and it got so large. I said, "Well, I better chop it up into three," and it worked out pretty well. The next one deals with both of them deal with the same characters, and they're getting more involved in crime solving. And so, without giving too much away, that's if you like those, the first story. By the end of the first story, a lot of people have come back and said, "I want to know what happened to so and so. When are you going to get that one out? Come on, I want to know." So that told me I was on the right track. And so I've done some minor editing to the other two and tightened some things up, some things I've learned. And a lot of what I decided to move on came from readers, my friends and other people. So that told me I was on the right track. And, so there's another crime that has to be solved, and the same thing with the third one. And there's death and mayhem, but not in big chunks. So these are solvable, hopefully solvable crimes that they're after. And so, and if you look at the cover of the book, you'll see that radio theme carries over. Drop Dead has a microphone in a pool of blood, a radio microphone, and radio it's picked up in the other two books as well, one way or the other.
Well, I can't, really wait to get my hands on those two copies and read those two. I'm sure they're amazing books, especially the way that you've written this book and really have that story intertwined. I mean, it captures people's attention, and it's a page turner. I'll tell you that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have more, at the back of this book. I've done a blurb that talks about what they're going to read inside. We can go through if you want to, but I've covered a little bit of it.
So why don't you share with us a little bit? Because I understand that you self-published your book, right?
Yes, that's right.
What inspired you to do that?
Well, in my research, writing research, I discovered that going the traditional way takes a lot of time, and the book publishing today is not what it was when I first started some years ago. And I realized I wanted to have a little more control over my work, and each year it got easier and easier to self-publish. It doesn't take an awful lot of money. It takes a lot of time, and you got to know exactly where you're going. But to me, it was an extension of writing. I didn't have to turn it over to somebody and then get beat up over, well, this is too long, or it doesn't fit into our format, and what have you. And so I was able to just from the information that's out there, talk to groups that are involved in self-publishing and got ideas and realized that it's just more fun. I know a lot of people would disagree. They love to just do the writing and turn it over and go on to the next one. But with the software available today, self-publishing is not all that difficult. And again, the whole idea is to keep control over what you're doing. That was my main motivation, and it worked okay. One thing you have to do, of course, is to make sure that you've got your market and audience pegged right, and then make sure that you're moving in the direction that they want to see in a book. How to get to those people is also a challenge, but it's a fun challenge. So
well, I know that Yeah, I know that your last book signing event that you had was to like a sellout crowd. I mean, people loved it, and so I have to really congratulate you because that says a lot, especially because you look at just the publishing industry itself, it could be really tough.
Yeah, for sure, and it is. Yeah, a book passage in San Francisco and in Corte Madera were they were instrumental in kicking it off, and I had a terrific turnout in our book signing venue. My wife helped me out a lot in that regard and identified a lot of people. So finding your audience is very important, and it was fun. We had a great time, and it was a great turnout. People at Book Passage said, "Gosh, I don't think we've ever had this many people." Especially with somebody who's written a first novel. First novels are tough because people don't know who you are. So, but we made sure that was taken care of with the people that we know, and some pre-publication helped out too.
So when you look at your writing for, just like tips for new writers, what would you share with them would be something that you would say that they should consider as they start their writing practice?
Well, that's a good question. That's a tough one to answer because everybody's different. Don't give up. That's got to be the first tip. And write. You mentioned write what you know, and that always threw me because I thought, this is a fiction, and everything I'm going to write in here is made up. I mean, I kind of lie for a living, and you got to be able to just dig into it that way. And not worry about the facts necessarily, but writing what you know with me was quite easy. Because I knew the area, and that's how I realized that really made a lot of sense. I knew the area. I knew old time radio. I got my ideas from newspapers. Newspaper articles would give me a lot of ideas. And that's a lot of new writers wonder, how do I get an idea to what to write about? And the main theme that I was able to work on for the Drop Dead came from an old newspaper article, and it just the kernel of an idea. My protagonist, Nick Sterling, he loves pigeons. He raises pigeons. He races pigeons. And so guess what? I raised and raced pigeons as a kid. So I knew a lot about that, and they play an integral part of his personality in the story. And I grew up in Middle Valley, and I knew where the bars were, so I could write about that as well. I knew the neighborhood, and I actually went down to one neighborhood that was just a block away from Park School, where I went to grammar school, and took a number of pictures of an area that still exists, and after I took some pictures, I was able to hone down my description, and the big thing is to just stick with it. I could have dropped this a number of times, but I just enjoyed it so much. So I would say to a new writer, enjoy what you're doing. And it shouldn't be a drag. A number of people have said, do you ever get caught up in writer's block? And I'm not saying this I'm just pat myself on the back. I don't know what that is. I never, in all three of these books, I've never come across writer's block per se. I always knew where I was going, and if things got a little hard, and they usually got hard in a plot point, just didn't quite make sense to me. And so I left it alone. And sometimes leaving things alone, either overnight, I'd go to bed thinking about, okay, this character's got to do this, and how do I get him to do that? And then so I'd go to bed, and the next morning I'd get up and I'd almost like dream about it. So I never got upset about the fact that things didn't come quite as easily as I thought they would, but I didn't. I was lucky. The blocking issue that you hear about Don't worry about it. And do sleep on problems that come up, and they will come up. We're using our brain, and it's flexible, but sometimes, like a computer, the cache gets too full. You'll empty it out a little bit sometimes. But loving what you like, loving the process. I've attended a couple of writing classes. That always helps. Only that you get some encouragement. But after a while, I didn't worry too much about that. And the other thing is finding names. This is a problem that a lot of new writers have, is how do you get all those names? Well, I have to tell you, I cheat, because I have a book called The Baseball Encyclopedia.
You cheat? What? I can't believe that.
I do cheat. Oh yeah. Well, if you lie for a living, you got to cheat. This book that I have is called The Baseball Encyclopedia. It's the complete and official record of Major League Baseball. It's 2,800 pages, weighs about 5 pounds. And if I'm looking for a name, I have discovered that baseball players have the best names. And so I would just thumb through it, and I'd look for pitchers. Pitchers always seem to have good character names. And I, to this day, if I'm looking for a name, suddenly the plot requires a person that has some physical characteristics, I thumb through that book, and I'll come up with a name. And if it doesn't fit today, it'll fit tomorrow. So I have about 5 or 6 pages of single space names that I've collected over the years, which is a lot of fun. And there's another helpful aid called Building Believable Characters. It's a Writer's Digest source book. And it helps you describe the physical characteristics of people that are angry, that are happy, that are frightened. And it also helps you with names where they come from, German names or Irish names. And so there are aids out there available to you. And if you just keep your library full of that, from time to time I'll go in and pick one out. And if I suddenly, a character will pop up that you were not aware of or you didn't have planned. And that happens all the time. And how do I fit that character in? Because the character talked to me and said, "Hey, I want to get into part of the story. Put me in there." And so you need to make sure that you have the resources available. And sometimes if you do get stuck in a plot point, finding the right character and the name will move you forward. And it's, like I said before, it's like you're channeling something or somebody. Those are don't copy people. I mean, that was my biggest fear, is that if I take one of Vince Flynn's stories and suddenly I'm thinking about that plot or that storyline, I don't want to get that part of the mix. So, but don't worry about that. If you've done a good job of your research, you've done a good job of putting together the story, and try to make sure that the story that you're writing moves the action along. You don't want it to stagnate. So, and just keep practicing. Writing, the writing is a skill that only works if you keep at it. And it took me many years to get the first one done, and the other two. And don't be afraid if the one story kind of fizzles and you get another one that pops up before you're finished with the first one. Keep at it, because you'll end up sometimes with 2 or 3 very good books or very good stories. So you just keep at it. Just do it. That's probably for me, that sums it up. Just sit down and do it. And I guarantee you'll have a lot of fun. And if they work, if your audience thinks so too, that's a double pleasure.
Okay, well, you had me stumped that you actually cheat, so I'm still kind of getting over that one. I wasn't expecting that, Joe. So, Well, do you know?
Well, there are no new ideas. You got to know that.
That is true. And I can understand, kind of having that cautiousness in mind when you're writing a story and developing a story, because we do read a lot, and you don't want to inadvertently, subconsciously take somebody else's stuff. So you're always having to be hyper vigilant on that,
Well, there's a wonderful book I discovered by Justin Kleon. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's a New York Times bestseller, and he the title of the book is called "Steal Like an Artist: 10 Things Nobody Told You About Being Creative." And that's kind of what I had in mind when I said I cheat. See, I don't believe there are no new ideas. I mean, everything that we're working on is built up on something else, and it's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek read. But if somebody's interested, I think it's a great book to have on your shelf.
Well, I know your book is available on Amazon. If someone wants to reach out to you and connect with you, is there a way they can do that?
Sure. My email address is Behm Group, BEHM Group, GROUP, @gmail.com. And I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody that has a question about writing or self-publishing.
Well, what a great resource that is, Joe. Well, you know what? Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
You're quite welcome. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Joe. What a great honor it's been to spend this time with you. And of course, to talk about your new book, Drop Dead, which is available on Amazon. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.